welcome Leica fans. Have you ever considered using Canon lenses on your Leica camera? Now, I have talked about this a little bit in the past. I've used Canon rangefinder lenses on Leica rangefinder cameras, but what I've not done is compare ultra-fast Canon autofocus lenses like a Canon 50 f1 and a Canon 50 f1.2 against things like a Leica Noctilux and also the classic Canon LTM 50 1.2. Now this won't be one of my deep dive technical videos on lenses. Instead, it's more hopefully just to maybe inspire you if you might want to try out Canon autofocus lenses on your Leica SL series cameras. So yes, just to mention, I will be using rangefinder lenses and autofocus lenses, but obviously to get autofocus you're going to need to use an autofocus compatible camera such as something like a Leica SL series or Lumix or something like that. Okay, let's get on to the video. Hey, welcome, Matt here from MrLeica.com. On this channel we talk about Leica related stuff most of the time. And so today we're going to talk about using Canon ultra-fast lenses on Leica cameras. Now I'll be totally honest, it was a bit of a misunderstanding on my part. So I had a student book me for a workshop in London, Sandeep, a great friend of mine. And he's like, Matt, do you want to try my Canon F1 lens on your Leica camera? And I didn't really give it much thought. I go, oh yeah, that's the Canon Dream lens, great. We arrive at the workshop and he's like, here's a lens, and I'm like, that's not a screw mount lens, that's like massive. He's like, yeah, it's a proper autofocus lens. So I'm like, how are you going to use an autofocus lens on an SL series camera? So suddenly I bought a Sigma autofocus adapter which converts Canon, I believe it's RF mount. I'll put it on the screen if I'm wrong. I'm not a Canon expert. Canon L series lenses to Leica L-mount, which is like your Leica SL2S, Lumix S series full frame cameras, things like that. Not only do you get the benefits of a 50 f1 ultra fast glass, you now also have autofocus. So it's like, this is going to be quite interesting. So it's like, right, I'll bring a classic 50 f1 Leica Noctilux and we'll do a head-to-head shoot against the 50 f1 Canon more modern autofocus lens. So that all sounded like fun, and then I thought to make it even more interesting, let's add into the mix a Canon 50 1.2 autofocus lens, a Canon 50 1.2 LTM rangefinder lens, and a 1966 Light Lens Lab 50 1.2 Noctilux remake. So most of my testing was on the Canon lenses versus the Noctilux, but I will include a few others just for interest. So what were my findings? So the first thing I noticed is if we compare the Canon 50 f1 autofocus lens to the Canon 50 f1.2 autofocus lens, first the size difference is pretty massive, and the weight and the cost. So the cost of the 50 f1, I think it's also called the Dream lens, Canon lens, is around, I think, £2,000. I'll put the number on the screen. Whereas if you're happy with a 50 1.2 Canon lens, it only costs around £500. So it's roughly 4 times difference to get a 0.2 difference in maximum f-stop. That's the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed, obviously other than the size and the weight, was the autofocus speed. The autofocus speed is way faster on the 50 1.2 than it is on the 50 f1, probably because just the amount of like glass and weight that the motors are trying to move. And then the third thing is I didn't notice a huge difference optically between the 50 f1 and the 50 1.2. I mean, this wasn't a scientific test, but I think if you take anything away from this video, if you like the idea of autofocus with a fast lens, you might be better with the Canon 50 1.2, not the Canon 50 f1, because they basically do the same thing, and as mentioned, it's 4 times cheaper. So what was the Canon lens like to use, or Canon lenses? So as I say, it was a workshop. Sandeep's been with me many times before. I was helping with lighting and all that kind of thing, and then I was kind of shooting off angle and across his shoulder and things like that. So the photos I'm showing won't be particularly amazing. It was more just to test the 2 different lenses. So first I tested the Canon 50 f1 versus the Noctilux, and I don't know, let me know in the comments. I think the bokeh's nicer from the Noctilux, but if you basically just need fast glass with shallow depth of field, the Canon lens is cheaper than the Noctilux. Next, if we line up all the different lenses, you can see the size differences so dramatic between the autofocus lenses, which have obviously got autofocus motors in. So that's your 50 f1 and your 50 f1.2 Canon lens. The Canon 50f1 compared to Noctilux is like a monster, and the Noctilux is a relatively big lens for a Leica M-mount camera.
I especially like.
This is your acting reel for your next happy. Have you turned it on yet? She's not even turned it on.
Wow! So this is lighter, and yeah,
That's Leica basically, that's Canon. So,
yeah, I'll probably go with this one.
good choice. Yeah. Next, if we compare the Canon 50 1.2 to the Canon 50 1.2 screw mount lens, I would say the main takeaway is the screw mount lens has got maybe more painterly rendering. I'd say it's softer, lower contrast. Yeah, just more vintage style, but it's both cheaper and way smaller. And you can use it on your rangefinder cameras. I've enjoyed using this lens. I can bring up some photos using the 50 1.2 Canon lens on Leica cameras, and I've really enjoyed it both for film and digital. So that was another thing. And then I just wanted to show the 1966 Light Lens Lab, which is one of my go-to lenses if I need a fast lens. Size wise, again, it's smaller than the Noctilux 50f1 from Leica, and it's much more high performing than the Canon 50 1.2, being a modern remake of a vintage lens. So to keep this video short, I think if you love the idea of autofocus with fast lenses, say you've not got amazing eyesight, consider the Canon autofocus lenses on your Leica SL series cameras. The main benefit, I think, for using older autofocus lenses on your Leica SL series camera, instead of say your Sigma lenses or Lumix S Pro or Leica SL series lenses, all the new lenses are like super sharp. So I don't own any of these lenses because as a guy that shoots female portraits, I need softer rendering, not sharper rendering. But maybe the more usable ones for me would be like the cheaper Lumix lenses. I pair those with a mist filter and that give me a softer look. But if you want a like true soft look, then I'd look at Canon older autofocus lenses, because then you don't need to use a mist filter. All the photos shared in this video, obviously no mist filters, because you don't need it on less clinical rendering lenses. I know everyone hates that word, but just to get the point across. So that was my main takeaway. Like if you're a portrait guy, the old lenses can give you less sharp rendering. If you just need sharp and you just need autofocus, maybe skip the Canon lenses and just get native L-mount lenses, as mentioned, from Lumix, from Sigma, from Leica. I must say big thanks to Sundeep. I've never actually used Canon autofocus lenses on a Leica camera before, so it's kind of an interesting experiment for me. If you do use Canon lenses on your Leica series cameras or native on Canon cameras, let us know in the comments which is your favourite lens for anybody considering adapting Canon lenses to Leica. If you missed my Canon versus Leica kind of head-to-head shootout, I'll link that on the screen next. Thanks for watching, and thanks as always to my amazing patrons.